Yes, I know we're in March, but I am still thinking about the 2024 releases that got away. Bibliophiles of the internet, today I thought I would look back on some books that came out in 2024 that unfortunately I left in 2024 and would still love to read. These books are on my TBR, obviously, but please do not consider this list to be a short-term TBR for myself. I assure you it is not. And of course, there's no time limit when it comes to how much time is allowed to pass after a book releases and before you read it, but I also don't want to forget these 2024 releases either. So I thought this would be a fun way to bring them back into my consciousness. So let's go through some of my most anticipated 2024 releases that I did not get to last year. Maybe you will find something to either put back onto or put on your radar as well. So let's just jump right in. Starting with We Are the Crisis by Cadwell Turnbull. This is the sequel to No Gods, No Monsters, one of the coolest books I've ever read that somehow blends fantasy, sci-fi, and horror in really fascinating ways. I don't want to say too much about the second book for those who are not yet familiar, but the first book begins with a character named Lena whose brother is shot and killed by police in an altercation that was unfortunately aired live on the news. But what seems like routine police brutality actually turns out to be much worse. The surveillance footage shows that her brother actually shifted into a monster, and that footage ends up going viral and revealing to the world that monsters do in fact exist. This causes a complete societal upheaval with people standing in solidarity with and also against the monsters, and it's basically an exploration of how that revelation changes everything. No Gods, No Monsters is a truly spectacular book. I think about it all the time. I cannot recommend it enough. I constantly find myself wondering what could possibly happen next, and sadly I have had the answers to what happens next just sitting on my shelf for almost an entire calendar year at this point. Next is The Perils of Lady Catherine de Bourgh by Claudia Gray. This is the third book in a criminally underrated historical mystery series that's also a really fun expansion of the Jane Austen canon. It's a series that brings together all of Jane Austen's characters in a series of locked room murder mysteries. The series actually follows Juliet, daughter of the Tilneys, and Jonathan, son of the Darcys, as this sort of amateur sleuthing duo who always seem to be at these house parties where people turn up dead. In this third book, Lady Catherine has actually heard of their success in uncovering killers on the loose and summons both of them to help her figure out who is attempting to kill her before they can succeed. This series is so clever, so fun, and such a surprisingly refreshing take on a Jane Austen-inspired story. It's not so much a retelling as an expansion that centers original characters while also paying homage to those beloved classics. The murder mysteries are really well put together. The dynamic between Jonathan and Juliet, which is both platonic and subtly romantic, is so wonderful to read, and Billy Fulford Brown, who reads the audiobooks, is absolutely fantastic. I actually requested this audiobook for review through PRH Audio last year, and I have not been able to get to it yet, but I keep putting it on my monthly TBRs just in case. Then we have Private Rights by Julia Armfield, which came out at the very end of 2024. I believe this is a queer dystopian take on King Lear, set in the somewhat distant future where the world is literally drowning from nonstop rain and society has completely reshaped itself in response. The story follows three sisters, Isla, Irene, and Agnes, who have been estranged for quite some time and are forced to reconnect with each other when their father dies. Their father was a famous architect, and the sisters have to come together to clear out the grand glass house that was his legacy, and in doing so they realize that outsiders have taken an interest in their father's estate, and their inheritance may not solely belong to them. I've heard really great things about this, both pre and post-release. I am a sucker for a Shakespeare retelling or reimagining, and I think there's a lot of potential here in this story about sisters navigating estrangement, grief, and a rapidly changing world. This next book is one that I feel like is destined to become a new favorite, and maybe that's why I've been putting it off, but that is In Universes by Emmett North. This is a queer speculative story following Rafi, who works in a cosmology lab searching for dark matter and trying to hide how little they understand their own research. They're also hopelessly in love with a queer sculptor named Britt, who basically takes up the rest of their time and brain space. Eventually, Rafi becomes fixated on the possibility of the multiverse, this idea that there might be a version of themselves out there somewhere who Britt actually loves back, and they end up following Britt across lifetimes and alternate universes. Only a few of my mutuals have read this book, but the ones who have been really blown away by it. It just feels like the perfect storm of of all my interests and speculative proclivities, so I don't want to wait too long to read this. I talked about this next book in my recent sci-fi starter pack video, but I have shamefully not made time to read Yoon Ha Lee's most recent YA book, Moonstorm, which is the first in a new series. It's about Hua Young, who was only 10 years old when Imperial forces destroyed her rebel moon home, but now 6 years later, she is a citizen of that very same empire and desperate to become an elite Lancer pilot. When their boarding school is suddenly attacked, Hua Young and her classmates find themselves stranded on an Imperial space fleet, and they find themselves quickly climbing the ranks because the fleet is now in dire need of new pilots. Honestly, I don't even really need to know what the story is about when it comes to Yoon Ha Lee. I love their work, I love their mind, I have thoroughly enjoyed everything I've read from them before, and I intend to read everything they write, and I think I'm gonna have a damn good time with this one because it's about mechas. Going from sci-fi to fantasy, one of the most popular releases of last year that I did not get a chance to get to was A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. This is a dark fairy tale retelling, which is one of T. Kingfisher's specialties. I believe it's a retelling of The Goose Girl, and it's about a girl named Cordelia who knows she has a very strained and unnatural relationship with her mother, who does not allow her to have any privacy or any friends. In fact, her mother is actually an evil sorceress, and after a suspicious death in their small town, her mom forces them to flee to the remote countryside where they find a wealthy man living with his unwed sister, and Cordelia's mom plans to lure the man into marriage. I've gotten away with not hearing too much about this one plot-wise. I do know that people have been really enjoying it though, and because I have really loved what T. Kingfisher has done with her retellings in the past, I know that I'm also most likely going to enjoy this. Last year, I read my first K. Ming Chang, Organ Meats, and immediately became obsessed. I have not only tracked down all of K. Ming Chang's backlist, but last year they also came out with a new book called Cecilia. This is another weird, surreal novella about obsessive friendship, and also, according to the synopsis, the ecstasy of desire and disgust. The story follows Seven, who works as a cleaner at a chiropractor's office where she runs into Cecilia, someone she's been obsessed with since their school days. They end up getting on the same bus, and their chance meeting ends up spurring a series of intensely vivid memories for them both. Even after only having read one book of theirs, I already know that K. Ming Chang is another one of those authors where the plot doesn't even really matter to me. They are such a talent and have such a distinct point of view and mastery of language that the best course of action is just to surrender to the weirdness. I already know it's going to be strange, messy, gross, disgusting, surreal, disorienting, and I cannot wait. Of course, I also keep an eye out for releases from Latina authors especially, and one that I regret not getting to last year was The Bullet Swallower by Elizabeth Gonzalez James. This is historical fiction that blends a Western story with magical realism. The first timeline is set in the late 1800s when a bandit named Antonio is struggling to help his family survive because a horrible drought has dried up his town of Dorado, Mexico. So when he hears about a train passing through that's laden with gold and other treasures, he sets out to take it for himself. The second timeline is set almost a century later and following Jaime, a famous actor and singer who discovers a book that seems to tell him the entire history of his family since the beginning of time. And from that book, he learns about the multitudes of horrific crimes committed by his ancestors. And when he realizes that one of the mysterious figures from Antonio's timeline has also shown up in his own time, he fears that he might have to pay the price for his ancestors' sins. Every time I hear the synopsis for this book, I am fascinated and I just want to know everything. I love Westerns told from marginalized perspectives. I love stories where disparate timelines are forced together. I love interesting uses of magical realism, especially in genre fiction. So I just think I'm gonna have a great time with this whenever I finally pick it up. Another release I missed last year was The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Leong. This is a sort of cozy fantasy standalone story about an immigrant fortune teller named Tao who travels between villages selling her services, but she can only tell small fortunes, like who's gonna start a new relationship or what the weather is gonna be like next week. But what she thought was a small fortune unexpectedly becomes something more when a semi-reformed thief and ex-mercenary recruit her to help them search for a lost child. This is another one I've seen a lot of people enjoy. It seems very cute and cozy. There's the promise of found family with this ragtag crew, which I absolutely love. I do own this one and it is fairly short, so I would like to get to it this year if I can. Next is a very popular release that came out at the tail end of last year. That is Blood Over Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong. This kind of already had a fan base because it was self-published to begin with, but it was then picked up by Penguin Random House, who re-released it last October. From what I understand, it's a blend of fantasy and dark academia about a woman named Sayana who's worked for 20 years to be the first woman ever admitted to the High Magistracy at the University of Magics and Industry. But when she finally passes the qualifying exam, she is not given a job as a lab assistant befitting her station and experience, but rather she is made a janitor. And what her colleagues don't know is that her new janitorial assistant was not always a janitor themselves. And though the two of them have a tense working relationship to begin with, they uncover an ancient secret that could forever change the way the world practices magic. I want to get on the M.L. Wong train so badly, and I've wanted to for quite some time. I know people absolutely adore The Sword of Kaigen, which is also on my radar, but I just crave an epic decolonial dark academia story with magic, so I think of the two, I would definitely prioritize this one first. Next, I want to talk about another fantasy release from last year that was a little bit under the radar. It's the first book in a new trilogy called The Scarlet Throne by Amy Lau. This is described as an epic political fantasy full of scheming demons, morally gray heroines, talking cats, and cutthroat priests. And I think I speak for all of us after seeing Conclave that we could use more of that last one. It's about Binsa, who's actually a living goddess chosen by the gods to preside over her people from the Scarlet Throne. But rather than channeling an immortal deity, she actually houses a demon inside herself. But the priests in her temple decide that it's time for her reign to end and pass on to a new, younger vessel. But Binsa refuses to be discarded and strikes a bargain with her demon to exchange the lives of her people in order to magnify her power, and in return he will help her finally seize control from the priests. All I have to say about this is say less. I don't need to know anything else. This is so ridiculously up my alley. I love possession stories, I love stories about Faustian bargains and vessel sharing with demons. It's just so fascinating to me, and I've also seen this book pitched as a badass fantasy that does not have romance. So sign me up. Another somewhat underrated release from last year was The Ballad of Jacques de la Haye by Brian E. Cameron. This is a queer historical pirate adventure inspired by true events. It begins in Santo Domingo, where Jacques is an up-and-coming shipwright who dreams of sailing the world, if not for her self-seeking father who keeps her trapped. But one day she is forced to flee her home and becomes a woman on the run along with a motley crew of refugees. They actually end up becoming indentured servants to the infamous Black Hand, a ruthless pirate captain, and when he hatches a dangerous plan to raid a Portuguese ship and steal their jewels, Jacques must rely on her wits, resourcefulness, and friends if she wants to survive. Again, if you tell me a story is about queer Afro-Latina pirates, I actually don't need to know anything else. This is yet another story that is ridiculously up my alley in so many ways. I am fascinated and I want to know so much more about this. Circling back to YA as we close out here, last year I was also hoping to read Twelfth Night by Alexine Farrell Fulmuth, who also writes under the pen name of Olivia Blake. This is a contemporary YA story that is a modern spin on the Shakespeare classic of the same name. The story follows Viola, whose favorite escape from all her problems is an MMORPG called Twelfth Night. But because the online gaming world is extremely misogynistic, she creates a masculine alter ego for herself so that the game is a little bit safer to play. What she doesn't realize is that her academic rival, the student body president to her vice president, Jack, also plays Twelfth Night, and they end up getting paired up in the game and discover that they are surprisingly well matched. So she knows who Jack's alter ego is, but he does not know who she is in the game, and as they begin playing together more and more, they become closer, and to make things even messier, Jack might be falling for Vi offline as well. I love a creative and refreshing new spin on Shakespeare, and I feel like that's exactly what this is. I love the concept of exploring or presenting a different identity online in an MMORPG, and I think it's going to open up a lot of really interesting opportunities for connection in this story. It just sounds delightful. Last but certainly not least, I still very much need and want to finally read Canto Contigo by my friend Johnny Gazavia. At least as of filming this, Canto Contigo is Johnny's most recently published book. Unfortunately, I was not able to read it last year when it came out because the SMP strike had not yet lifted, but since that has at least been formally resolved, I get to now circle back to this. Don't quote me on this, but I believe this is a queer contemporary romance with just a touch of magical realism about two queer Mexican-American students who are in rival high school mariachi bands. The main character, Rafael, is the lead singer of his school's mariachi band and recently led them to their 11th consecutive win at nationals. But 8 months later, not only is Rafi grieving his recently passed abuelo, but his family is moving to San Antonio for his senior year, and the mariachi band at his new school already has a lead singer, aka Ray, Rafi's rival and secret crush. Johnny often calls this their love letter to the epic highs and lows of high school mariachi. This book also was a Stonewall Award winner, which is so exciting. I'm so glad that Johnny is getting their flowers because they so deserve all the love and success. Not to flex on anyone, but I am currently reading an arc of their upcoming book as of filming this, and it's only reminding me how much I have missed their voice and their storytelling. It is so distinctive and so special. Johnny has never once let me down with any of their books, and I doubt Canto Contigo will be any different. I cannot wait to finally read this. Trust me, I could name so many more books. I'm already thinking of things like I Am the Dark That Answers When You Call, Metal from Heaven, A Crane Among Wolves. There are definitely more books I did not get to last year that will continue to haunt me, but I will leave it at that. And of course, if there are any books that you feel like you missed out in 2024, frontlist, backlist, I don't care. I would love to hear all about them down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found something to add to your TBR, and until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself and others, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.